I love Sonic Adventure. I'm not exaggerating when I say that it's one of my favorite games of all time, and I play it regularly even today. I live in the US, and the Dreamcast came out here on September 9th, 1999, with Sonic Adventure as a launch title, and I got it roughly at release as a birthday present when I turned 12 years old. I was very hyped for this. I don't think I can really put it into words. I had played some other 3D platformers by then, like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, but I was a huge Sonic fan as a kid, and I was just so excited to go on the first real 3D adventure with Sonic. I loved the Genesis Sonic games, and I had actually gotten a Sega Saturn with the idea that the next big Sonic game would come out on it, but of course it didn't. Instead, we got Sonic Jam, which was a sort of compilation of the Genesis games, Sonic R, which was a racing game, and Sonic 3D Blast, which was different from the Genesis version, but not that different. I actually played a ton of Sonic Jam and Sonic R, but honestly those deserve their own videos, so I won't go into them too much here. I didn't play a ton of 3D Blast on Saturn because I played it a lot on Genesis before, and I was clearly interested in new experiences, which is why I played Sonic 3 and Knuckles on Sonic Jam for the 500th time. I think it was a few weeks or maybe months before launch, and I was at a Toys R Us, RIP, and I picked up this magazine, and I remember walking around the store with it, and it was all about the Dreamcast and had all of the upcoming games. I wasn't really reading it. I don't know if that was just me, but I didn't really read through stuff. I just kind of looked at the screenshots and the art, and my mom bought me this magazine, or maybe they were giving them away for free. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I just remember my overwhelming anticipation for this system and for Sonic Adventure. It's kind of possible that Sonic Adventure was one of, if not the first game, that I ever really anticipated and hyped up in my head prior to release. Most other games before it, I just kind of remember stumbling upon them after they had already released. And sure, there were some games that were already out that I was very excited about, but this was the first time I was waiting for a release date, I think. Over the years, I became a little bit more cynical since some games that were really highly anticipated ended up really disappointing me. But in regards to Sonic Adventure, I'm happy to report that not only was I not disappointed, I was completely floored by this game in the same way that I had been with Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time before it. As a 12-year-old in 1999, this was mind-blowing. I mean, the game had cutscenes and voice acting and vocal music tracks and multiple characters to play through, each with their own story. This was just so impressive to me at the time. Now, over the years, I've heard people say that they thought Sonic Adventure games were trash, or that Sonic was never good. And, oh man, that just makes me sad. But I have to admit, that negativity got me down for a while, and I didn't play Sonic games much for a bit there. But after some time, I came back to them, and I kind of rediscovered why I love those games, and especially the Sonic Adventure games. So this is kind of like a deep dive into everything I love about the game. We're also going to talk about some of its flaws, because it's not perfect, but this is going to be, hopefully, a very positive video that makes you want to play Sonic Adventure. Also, I should mention that the footage you'll see in this video is from the Steam release of Sonic Adventure DX, since that's how I usually play it nowadays, with a few graphical mods to make it look more like the original Dreamcast release. But I think it's time for us to jump into what I love about the game.
Let's get him!
Right off the bat, one of my favorite things about the game is how it controls. Now this is, like all things here, just my opinion, but I really like how the characters move and feel, especially considering it's a 3D game from 1999. Each character controls differently, and I honestly think they feel great for the most part. It's not perfect, and sometimes if you're running too fast, it can feel like the movement is too quick when you're trying to turn or adjust, but for the most part it's fantastic. The game's physics are one of the main reasons I love how the characters control. The only way I can describe it is fun. It's just fun to be able to run around really fast and then spin dash up slopes. It almost feels like you're breaking the game. It feels like the whole game is just your playground to experiment and master the controls and physics, and you have all sorts of mobility. And although I haven't played all of the new 3D Sonic games, I've never really played one that I felt was as fun to control as Sonic Adventure. Another one of my favorite things about the game is the open world hubs that the game uses. In-game they're called adventure fields, and there's 3 of them. Station Square, which is an urban city center, Mystic Ruins is a dig site in the jungle that connects up with Angel Island when that falls out of the sky, and the Egg Carrier, which is Eggman's giant airship. I loved exploring these hubs as a kid. You can talk to the NPCs and they have different things to say depending on where you are in the story, so you can follow along on like little mini stories with them, like this lady who has a crush on the burger shop worker, but I was convinced that she had a crush on the mannequin of the burger shop that's standing outside and that she didn't know was a mannequin. So I was waiting for some drama to unfold, but later on, I do find out that she's actually crushing on the human inside the burger shop. So, that was a little bit disappointing, but I mean, this is captivating stuff here. And there's all sorts of little stories for the NPCs around the hubs and stuff. It's really fun. I don't know, it makes the world feel, I think, more alive. Anyway, going back to the topic of the hubs, you can even find items and power-ups, some of which you need in order to progress. And of course, you find the entrances to the stages in the hubs. They really just evoked my imagination as a kid. I remember riding the train from Station Square to Mystic Ruins and just thinking it was the coolest thing, and just going back and forth riding the train. I also loved entering the hotel and going to the pool and wondering about these 2 elevators. One of them doesn't open at the beginning of the game, so I was so curious about where it might go. Eventually, you do find out through the story. I believe Knuckles uses it. So it's one of those things that makes the open world hubs so interesting. And if you're familiar with the game and you're wondering when I'm going to talk about the other elevator that does open, don't worry, we'll get to it, just hold your horses. Our next stop is the Mystic Ruins. The vibes here are just fantastic, and it feels a little bit more Sonic than the human city. I also really loved Tails as a kid and still do, and coming out here and seeing his workshop in a physical place was just awesome. I still feel like this is just such a cozy little spot. It looks like maybe Tails is using some sort of hydro power here. I'm not sure, but there's definitely some big brain engineering going on here. The Egg Carrier is the third and final hub area, and I really love the vibes here too. It's just really cool exploring one of Eggman's bases without any real sense of urgency, and the music really slaps. Also, really dig the extra rooms around here, like Eggman's pool. Like, when does he use this? There's also this sort of study room with books and a chair and a little fridge, and a playroom with slot machines and things like that. It's pretty cool. But by far my favorite things here are these monorails that you can take to get to the outside or the inside of the Egg Carrier. The hub worlds are all connected in the world, and so are all of the game's stages. The first stage, Emerald Coast, is literally just the beach behind the hotel. Casinopolis is just the casino in the downtown. And Red Mountain is a mountain on Angel Island which falls near the Mystic Ruins. Everything just feels like a real connected world, and I love that kind of detail. Speaking of stages, I love the structure of these stages in this game. Some of them have more linear sections or more open sections, but it all works really well. The more linear segments still tend to have things to find or shortcuts, and the more open segments are just a blast to explore and play around in and see what you can find. Part of the reason why these stages are so interesting is that characters with different playstyles share some of these stages. For example, the At Dawn section of Speed Highway, which is being shown right now. If you're playing as Knuckles, you have to find 3 emerald pieces in this stage. So it's very open and freeform, but Sonic also comes here, so there are these awesome ramps and running sections thrown in, making the stage feel like a huge playground with a different vibe depending on what character you come here with. It's always fun trying to find different routes and secrets when playing different characters, which to me is very reminiscent of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Additionally, each stage has different ranks, so you can replay stages with different objectives, which incentivizes you to get better at the game. The reward is an emblem, which is basically an in-game achievement, and if you get all 130 emblems, you can unlock Metal Sonic as a playable character, but I don't have footage of that because I am not good enough to do that. Some of the stuff is just really tough. For me. I don't know, I suck. And in the DX version of the game, you also unlock Game Gear games with emblems, which is really cool. Now we gotta talk about the music. This soundtrack is non-stop bangers. I listen to it so much on Spotify. I seriously don't think there are any bad songs in this soundtrack. So many cool styles here too, like the beachy and chill vibes of Emerald Coast. The synthy and kind of melancholy At Dawn from Speed Highway. Even the character select theme is absolute gold. Not to mention all of the vocal tracks in the game, each one with their own style and vibes, all of them fantastic. The soundtrack does have a greater rock music influence than previous chiptune Sonic games, but it somehow still feels very reminiscent of classic, catchy Sonic tunes. Next, let's talk about characters. The character selection and gameplay mechanics here are awesome. Sonic 3 and Knuckles on the Genesis let you pick between playing as Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, and you could chart a different route with different characters, but other than some small changes, they mostly had the same stages and very similar gameplay, except for some added mobility options. In Sonic Adventure, each character has their own story though, and they all kind of come together at the end for the final story. There are still some shared stages and boss fights, but each character has unique gameplay this time around, and you unlock each character as you meet them in the story, which is kind of a cool feature. Sonic, of course, has the traditional go to the end of the stage gameplay, and his gameplay is probably the most consistently fun. Tails' stages are races where he has to reach the end of the level before Sonic in order to win, which can be super fun once you start to learn the shortcuts and how to use his flying ability effectively. Knuckles has to find pieces of the Shattered Master Emerald, so his stages tend to be more open and exploration heavy, making his gameplay really different. But it really fits his moveset since he can glide and climb, so he can explore a lot of nooks and crannies. Amy has to reach the end of the stage just like Sonic and Tails, but she moves slower than they do, and has a hammer attack, which she can use to do a really fun high jump. She's also constantly being chased by this robot the whole time and can't do much about it. Her stages used to really drive up my anxiety as a kid. It was some scary stuff. So her stages are more about puzzles and finding your way quickly through the stage. Personally, these are very anxiety-inducing, and I would describe them as survival horror platforming. Gamma, who is one of Eggman's robots, is an interesting one, partially because of the narrative, but also because the gameplay is almost like an on-rails shooter, but not on rails. I don't know how to describe it. He has a targeting system and he shoots enemies while a timer counts down. He has to reach the end of the stage before the timer runs out, but you can add time by defeating enemies. It's pretty fun, and his mobility is great. He can hover jump, he can hover over water, and when he moves forward long enough, he turns into a little car. Look at how cute he is. He's adorable. And finally, there's Big the Cat, who fishes. And, yeah, we're going to get back to Big later. Just hold on. I actually really like the different characters and really enjoy switching it up. I particularly wish that Amy and Gamma had a few more stages, as their stories feel kind of short, and I really enjoy them. And speaking of story, I really like the main story. It's not going to win any narrative awards, or whatever storytelling awards are called, I have no idea. But it's a good Sonic story. I'm not going to spoil anything here, because even though it's an old game, my hope is that at least one person watching this video hasn't played the game, and maybe this will make them want to play it. So, no spoilers. But yeah, it's a good Sonic story. You've got the Chaos Emeralds, Dr. Eggman is up to no good. It's exactly what I would want out of a Sonic story. The individual character stories are fun too. I really like watching Tails become more independent and grow as a character. And Amy and Gamma's stories are great. Gamma's in particular I find to be one of the highlights of the game, and no joke, gets me kind of emotional. I also really like some of the world building here, and as you go through the main story you learn about some ancient events that went down and some Echidna lore. And it feels pretty much in line with what I would expect from the Sonic universe. I especially like the Tikal character who you meet throughout the story. Also, she's all about treating the Chao well, and I mean, you just gotta love that, right? I mean, she's objectively a good person. And if you don't know what Chao are, don't worry, that's what we're gonna talk about next. This is the moment we've all been waiting for, or at least me. Time to revisit this elevator to see what wondrous magical things await us. This is the Chao Garden, what might be, without exaggeration, one of the most complex virtual pet games ever made. Just casually hanging out in Sonic Adventure as a side activity. It's not for everyone. If you don't like virtual pets or spending hours and hours taking care of them and raising up their stats, then this may not be your cup of tea. But for me, when I found this, I was instantly hooked. I loved everything about virtual pets as a kid, like Pokemon, Digimon, Monster Rancher, etc. And as a virtual pet enthusiast, I have never seen anything that came before or after the Sonic Adventure games with such a deep and complex system. The elevator is right in the hotel lobby, outside the entrance to the first level, Emerald Coast, so I found it pretty early on as a kid. It seems simple enough to start. You get 2 eggs here in the garden, and you can wait for them to hatch on their own, or you can wiggle them around to speed up the process. You can also throw them to immediately hatch them, but I won't show that because I'm not a monster. Then it's up to you to take care of your new baby Chao. You can give them attention by petting them or hugging them, and of course you'll need to feed them with the coconut-like fruits in the garden. There are actually 3 gardens to raise your Chao in, 1 in each hub world, and you unlock them as you progress through the game. The Station Square and Mystic Ruin ones are great, but the Egg Carrier one is basically a giant mountain in the center, making it pretty hard to see, and I have a really hard time finding my Chao here, so I don't tend to use this one much. And those are sort of the basics, but things don't really stop there. You see, Chao have stats, and those stats can be improved by bringing them small animals to play with. So now there's a natural game loop. You go play a stage, you get some animals, and then you bring them back to your Chao to improve their stats. You can feed them and pet them while you're here, and then you go off to repeat the process. The Chao need said stats in order to compete in some high-octane, edge-of-your-seat racing, obviously. The stats are swim, fly, run, power, and stamina. The higher the stats, the better the Chao can do in the race. And I particularly like how in order to stop crawling, they need to pass a certain threshold in the run stat. And the same with the swim stat in order to start actually swimming instead of drowning their way to victory. I always teach my Chao to swim as soon as I can because every garden has water, and if they start drowning in the water, they can get really unhappy. It is worth mentioning again that this is Sonic Adventure DX, which I'm playing on Steam, which is a PC port of a GameCube port of a Dreamcast game. So there are a few differences here from the original Dreamcast release. And while I'm not going to talk about all of the differences in each game version, I do think the changes to the Chao Garden are worth mentioning. The stats were changed a little bit, and the Chao Garden as a whole was revamped quite a bit because Sonic Adventure DX takes most of the features that were in the Chao Garden in Sonic Adventure 2 and brings them to the first game. The main thing of interest that got brought over from Sonic Adventure 2 here is the Chao Black Market, where you can spend rings to buy stuff like rare eggs for more Chao, special fruits, toys, etc. This really feeds into the whole game loop again, because now you're not only getting animals at each stage to bring back to your Chao, but also having to save up your rings to buy some pretty expensive stuff in the black market. Never in any Sonic game before or after the adventure games has my heart sunk so much when I have like 300 rings or something, and I get hit and I lose them all. Oh, I feel weak just talking about it. Alright, moving on. Something that I really like in the DX version is that all of the emblems that you earn actually increase the number of items available at the black market, giving you more incentive to replay stages to get emblems or to search every nook and cranny of the hub worlds. Also, I haven't even mentioned that the stats actually affect what your Chao evolve into. Yes, that's right, they evolve twice actually. Also, you can mix evolutions to create even more diversity. I could go on and on and on, but I think I'll maybe save it for the Sonic Adventure 2 video, since that's the Chao Garden that I think is more popular and certainly the one I play more, which has even more features if you can believe it. Suffice it to say, the Chao are one of my favorite parts of the adventure games, and it's deeply disturbing that they haven't made a comeback in all of these years. Alright, well, I love this game, but it certainly isn't perfect, so let's talk about some of the issues I have with it. The game is old, and it has some jank for sure. I don't think there's a game from this era with a truly fantastic camera, and this is no exception. Even though the characters control well enough, I still find myself falling or dying because of bad camera angles, and times when I just wish I could control the camera better. There's also some cutscene jank, and I have no idea what's going on with the face animations during speech. I would say the voice acting itself is actually quite good, but the script and localization is sometimes, well, it's not the best in the world, or maybe it's the direction or something. I don't know anything about voice acting. Now, as I said, I love the hub worlds, but why did it have to be a regular human city? It feels weird. Growing up with the games, comics, and cartoons, Sonic the Hedgehog, I always envisioned him living in a world of anthropomorphic animals, with maybe Eggman being the only human left, an anomaly. and not even fully human anymore, more machine than man. But no, apparently, according to this game, Sonic lives in a very American-looking city or something. I don't know. And he and his pals are unique, and everyone else is a normal human, if a bit low poly. This is weird, and I've never gotten used to it. I really do have a great time exploring this world. I actually find the city really charming and memorable. I just find the world building of it kind of weird. So all things considered, it's really just a minor nitpick. Alright, now we need to talk about big. Okay, hear me out. I don't dislike the fishing minigame. It's actually pretty good. It's fun hanging out in some of these stages you usually move fast in, but with a more laid-back vibe. And much like the other characters, Big has power-ups he can get. Some help him float on water, some help him get bigger fish easier. It's actually a lot of fun to explore around and get these power-ups and improve your fishing gear. And it's pretty well fleshed out. I would put it right up there with other great fishing minigames like Ocarina of Time and other games from the late 90s, early 2000s. But the thing is, it's not a minigame. And it's not a side activity like the Chao, something optional. It's part of the main story, an obligatory, unskippable part of the main story. And if you're like me, you often played Big last, which meant that the final chapter of the story and the narrative climax was paused for about an hour or two, or a lot more when I was a kid and I had no idea how to do this, while you fish for a frog. I honestly think they should have just made this a side activity like the Chao. If this was optional, I think people would more fondly remember it, because again, it's not a bad fishing minigame. That way it wouldn't break the pace of the story, but it could be a nice break when the player wants it. Maybe you could even earn extra rings as you set new records. It could even take place in the hub world partially, giving them even more personality. Every hub world has water, and the game has other minigames and side activities, it's got several. So why they chose the fishing to be an integral part of the story progression is a bit baffling. Also, Big moves really slowly, which again, wouldn't be a big deal if this was just a fun optional thing, but when you're trying to get through it and see the end of the game, it's kind of infuriating since he can only fish in the stages and he has to get to them just like everybody else, but he moves super slow. My advice is, don't leave Big's story for last. Maybe just play it as soon as you unlock it. Alright, but that's enough negativity. I really do love this game. Of course it's got some flaws, every game does. I really just wanted to share with everyone my experience with Sonic Adventure, both growing up with it and returning to it over the years, and just wanted to celebrate it a little bit. I don't think it's an exaggeration to call Sonic Adventure, as it launched in 1998 in Japan, one of the most ambitious 3D games to date. For perspective, this came out in Japan the same year as Zelda Ocarina of Time, only a month later I think. And while, of course, Ocarina of Time is an absolute masterpiece, I think Sonic Adventure deserves more recognition. Because it wasn't just doing the same thing as Super Mario 64 or the 2D Sonic games that came before it. I think it was really innovating and experimenting in all sorts of ways, while at the same time really managing to stay true to the spirit of Sonic games. And that's just awesome. So at this point I estimate that you're 100% sure you want to play this game. Whether you want to try it out for the first time or revisit it, I've got some great news. As I've mentioned in the video, it is on Steam, and playing it on PC you have access to mods too. It's fairly cheap too, and although everybody's computer is different, I've never had any issues having it run on my modern PC, so it's pretty easy to play it today. So if you made it to this point in the video, I just want to give you a special thanks for listening to me rant about Sonic Adventure for so long. I was pretty excited to make this video, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it and you want to see more videos like this, you gotta hit the like button. That's the only way to communicate to me that you liked the video. And if you want to be notified about new videos I put out, well then you gotta hit the subscribe button. That's the only way I can communicate with you about the new videos I put out. And now we're just gonna hang out here for a little while and enjoy some of these super chill vibes from Sonic Adventure. Thanks for watching.